And what it highlights to me is the massive delta between what a politician thinks their constituents wants and what's actually going on. And so I see this footage of a young kid shot in the face by a submachine gun by a copper that clearly didn't know what he was doing. And as I look at this content and I see this, I have a difficult time joining the dots between a guy getting shot by the police, whether that was on purpose, an accident, or whatever the case may be, and then somebody burning down a public library. No. I'm having a hard time joining the dots between those two things. But what I see, and my theory is this, Ed, and I think you guys there in the United States are on the precipice of something like this as well. I think what it's got to do with is unchecked immigration. When you have unchecked immigration from poor countries who are supported by generous governments. So these governments are so generous, they're like, come, we'll save you from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Iraq, from wherever these poor African nations are. And many of them are genuine refugees escaping a war in Afghanistan or Syria or something like that. Many of them are the real deal, but many of them are just taking advantage of the goodwill of Western society and European society. And what I think it does is it highlights the fact that these people come to these countries, and I don't know, I could be completely wrong here, and that's why I'm looking to be corrected, and I'm happy to be corrected on these things. But what I see is these poor people coming to these affluent countries where they have the opportunity to get a handout, and they're like, okay, they'll support us when we get there. We'll have housing, we'll have food, I'll be able to go and get a job, I'll be able to get on my feet, and I'll be able to live the life that I want to live. I believe that most of them are pretty genuine in that sense. And same goes for the South American immigrants that are coming across the border. They just want to get away from the shitty governments and the shitty life that they have there because they see a better opportunity for themselves in the United States. But the problem is when these people arrive in these Western countries, wherever they might be, it happens here in Australia as well, there's not enough jobs to go around. And even if there were enough jobs to go around, I can only give you maybe about 15 hours a week, mate, unfortunately. So these people end up falling below the poverty line. And the government can only give them so much money. They can help them get up on their feet, but then they quickly kind of cut ties with them and go, okay, now you're on your own, go get a job. You're here in society, we've set you up, you're ready to go. Now you have to be like everybody else. And the problem is, in unchecked immigration, there's no plan to help those people continue because all of the manufacturing jobs have been shipped offshore to China. And all of the jobs that are there in small business have already been taken by the immigrants that have come in before them. So there's massive unemployment. And then they're all going, oh, we don't have any money. How are we going to live? And the government gives them more handouts. And then all of a sudden they turn on them. So we saw this, I'll close this little thought here. We saw this when the American government went into Iraq and they drove up the highway. They knocked the statue of Saddam Hussein down and George Bush flew into an aircraft carrier and said, mission accomplished. And everybody looked at each other and said, well, that wasn't as hard as what we thought. And here we are. And George Bush even admitted the biggest mistake he made in all of that was saying mission accomplished. Because when they had done that, they inserted a guy named Paul Bremer. And Paul Bremer went to the Iraqi society as the person who was going to be in charge. He was the quasi wannabe president of Iraq. Now, Saddam was gone. Someone had to be in charge. And there was only one party in Iraq, and that was the Ba'ath Party. That was Saddam's party. Everyone was a Ba'athist. And what they said was, okay, now Saddam's gone, everyone's happy. And they were celebrating in the streets. And everybody was happy and they were running around and they were looting and taking televisions, and CNN was saying, this is what democracy looks like. You might remember all of that footage. But then the Americans came along and said, well, what are we going to do? Are we just going to leave these people to their own devices? And in their infinite stupidity, they came up and said, no, because if we do that, the Ba'ath Party is the only political party here. It will just come back and we just cut the head off the Hydra and another Hydra will come back, and we still don't have Saddam, so he could come back. So we need to have the complete de-Ba'athification of Iraq. So what it meant was they completely dissolved all of Iraqi society that was to do with anything to do with the Ba'ath Party. So imagine in your city, you had Republicans and you had Democrats and you had independents and you had Greens and you had different types of political systems. If it all went away, then all of a sudden they recreated the bureaucracy. And it took about 3 or 4 months. And everybody that worked in government, suddenly, the people that were happy that the Americans had come and liberated them from Saddam because they didn't want to live under that repression or the fear of that, suddenly all of those people started to turn against Paul Bremer and the debathification policy that he created. And we've seen this play out. And this is what's playing out in France. And this is what's going to play out in the United States as well. These people are for everything. They think it's a great idea in theory, but in execution, the poor Iraqi platoon sergeant sitting around there going, man, I haven't been paid in like 4 months. I didn't want to fight the Americans. I didn't fight the Americans. And they're here now. Okay, cool. The coalition here, Saddam's gone. Okay, cool. And we've got a better future. We're going to have democracy here. Okay, cool. But how do I feed my family? And the reality is I'm not getting paid. And so one of his mates rings him and goes, you know what? Fuck these guys, man. They said they were going to pay us, but they haven't paid us. Fuck these guys. And everybody in Baghdad has got an AK, and everybody in the army takes their weapons home and their webbing and their live ammunition. They all get together and they start protesting. And the natural extension of that protest is, are you going to pay us? Yeah, we're going to pay. Yeah, we're going to sort it out. We're going to sort it out. But we need to be paid now. We need the money now. And they've got all the guns because they're the army. And then suddenly they start to come together, and then you have these people come in, these radicals come in, Al-Qaeda, al-Zarqawi, come in and go, you know what? Why don't we rally around each other here and help each other and go and fight back against these guys? One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And I look at that and I think that's exactly what's happening in France. It's not the de-Baathification of France or the de-Macronization of France. They're not trying to get rid of the government, but the government has come in and promised all of these things to the refugees, promised all of this to the unchecked immigration, where they open the borders to everybody, and now they're turning against you. And I don't think it has much to do with a kid getting shot in the face. It has a little bit to do with that. That's the spark that lit the fire, but I think that this is going to blow up into something much bigger. And, you know, there's people going around saying that if this was happening in China, or this happened in Russia or Venezuela or in Cuba or in Vietnam, you would call it a civil war. It looks like a civil war where the population are rising up against the government, and there's more of them than there is of the police. I don't know. What do you think? That's my take.
Okay, so not only do I want to pull on that thread, I want to fucking yank on that thread, okay? Right. Because now you in the audience, you might not know this, but Rob and I, we purposely do not share the subject that we want to talk about until about 10 minutes ahead before we hit the record button. Because we want to see, and it turns out we both wanted to talk about this topic. And I had my little presentation prepared, and Rob said, well, he's going to have all the videos. And I said, well, never mind then. But in my presentation, in my comments, the comments I was making was this idea that this forced, diversification of the country has led to this. Now, this, in my opinion, is largely the result of these policies that were adopted by these European Union countries. France, Germany, and the rest of them. Poland pushed back, Bulgaria pushed back, Hungary pushed back.
There's a couple countries.
So they've saved themselves to a large degree from this chaos. But they imported all of these people who from completely different culture. And expecting them, they thought, oh, well, they will integrate. And of course, they painted this picture, as always, humanitarian. This is for, my opinion is, because these are almost all military age young men and leaving. There weren't that many women and children coming out. They should be freaking at home. If they don't like what's going on in their country, they should pick up arms and fix it over there. Instead, they leave their women and children behind, and they go to France and Germany because they're going to get free stuff. Now, most of these refugees from these wars out of Syria and the rest of them, who ended up in these European countries, they had no interest in learning French and integrating into French society. They were going to adopt the values of French society. They wanted free stuff. They wanted a better life. Let
me pause there and ask a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that a multicultural society is one that can work?
Well, of course. Look at America. America is, the world, melting pot. Diversification should only strengthen a country, right?
So why is it failing in those places like France and stuff?
The key is, okay, so if we have all these immigrants coming to America, we want them to bring their traditions and their and their bloodlines and all. We want all of that, but we still have our values that we expect them to adhere to. We have values. That's what the American flag. That's why I don't believe in all of these flags. Fuck all these extra flags. We have the American flag. It covers everyone. Okay, because but the American flag represents a core set of values that it means to be an American. So I don't like this hyphenated American stuff. African American, Indian American. Just take the hyphenation out of it. You're American. If you're a citizen, you're American. Now, as an American, you would hope would share the value that America is founded on, the value that made America great. So if you're going to come to America, if you want to be a citizen, first of all, you should start out by respecting our damn laws. Technically speaking, every illegal immigrant here is a criminal because they broke a law just by violating the first law. And it makes all those people around the world who are trying to get into America legally, which is a very grueling process. It's like an 8 to 10 year process to get in here legally. Well, those people probably feel like chumps. Those people should be more angry about this illegal immigration than anyone else, right? Because they're trying to do it the right way, and they come here because they believe in the values of America. Yes, they want a better life, but they also believe in what America stands for. Well, so all these people coming up from and yes, a lot of them are Central and South American, but more and more of them now, as you and I both know, are not. They're from China. They're from you name it. They're from countries everywhere. Right?
Did you see the footage of the Chinese military age males? They get across the border, and literally within a day, they're on a shooting range.
Yeah.
And they look competent with firearms. They know what they're talking about. They're firing away. They're mucking around, laughing with their mates and stuff, going, "Oh, this is fun." But then if you look closely at what they're doing, he's holding that weapon correctly, and he's doing that properly. And you think, man, is that like the Soviet K program where the CCP are inserting the enemy there as a sabotage attack? Possibly.
Well, and you and I have talked extensively about context in this illegal immigration, because on the one hand, you and I would say it's a shit show down there. It is pure chaos. They don't know what to do. It's incompetence. Whereas I would argue the opposite. No, this is viewed as a huge success by the leftists. Right. Yep. This is the plan. So the leftists don't consider the open border that we have in this as a failure. They see it as a huge success. And I think it's the same in Europe. These globalists, people who believe in the one world. Well, I don't want this to be flag.
We know where you're going. It's okay.
Yeah. These people, these elitists in very powerful organizations centered in Switzerland, let's just say, these guys, they want control and they want power. That means, sovereignty is not a good thing. They don't want countries to have sovereignty. That's the whole idea behind the EU. Instead of, all the European countries having their own sovereignty, they want everyone under one umbrella answering to a committee of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels who makes all the decisions for them. I don't know why these countries in Europe, why would you do that? It still boggles my mind that these countries in Europe would voluntarily turn over their sovereignty. But on the other hand, we're doing it too. Here in America, our leftists, they want to turn over our sovereignty to these globalists as well. So this is a pattern of they want to dilute and diminish individual countries' sovereignty. And the way they do it is they flood these countries like France, like Germany, with people who have no intention of integrating into those societies. All these big countries, whether it's London, whether it's Paris, whether it's Malmö, Sweden, they have what they call no-go zones where the police are not allowed to enter, right? And that's where these immigrants go in, and they bring all their crap beliefs from the crap society that they just left into that new neighborhood, and they all part. So that just shows me they don't want to integrate. They just want to live in a place where they're going to get free stuff by these socialist countries.
Have you seen on that point? Have you seen what happened in Belgium? So it's anticipated in Belgium that because Belgium has a significant population decline, and I'm happy to be corrected here if I haven't recounted it because I saw it a long time ago, but the population decline in those citizens is quite significant, and part of the reason they allowed all the illegal immigration or the immigration from Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and those war-torn countries was to fix the population problem, and it does because it fixes it immediately, right? Because you have